Hunter sets a vicious trap, then collapses when he realizes who has fallen into it. The miracle that follows makes everyone cry. The sun beat down mercilessly on the parched earth, casting long shadows that danced with the swaying weeds. Rusty lay huddled beneath a scraggly bush, his once lustrous golden fur matted and dull, his body a canvas of pain. The rusted jaws of the bear trap, a cruel relic of a hunter's carelessness, bit deep into his right foreleg, a constant reminder of his abandonment and suffering. It had been 2 months since his world had shattered. He remembered the day vividly, the hurried packing, the unfamiliar tension in the air, and the finality in his human's eyes as they drove away, leaving him chained to a post, a silent promise of return echoing in his ears. Days turned into weeks, the chain his only companion, the gnawing hunger a constant torment. Then, one desperate night, driven by the primal need to survive, he had broken free, only to stumble into the hunter's trap, a cruel twist of fate that sealed his misery. Rusty whimpered, the phantom pain in his leg throbbing in sync with his broken heart. He longed for the touch of his human, the warmth of a loving hand, the sound of his name spoken in that familiar, comforting tone. But all that remained were the echoes of a life lost, a love betrayed. He licked his wounds, the metallic tang of blood a grim reminder of his reality. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the landscape in a somber hue. As darkness enveloped him, Rusty closed his eyes, his dreams haunted by the ghost of his past, his heart heavy with the weight of his loneliness. The first rays of dawn painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, casting a soft glow over the desolate landscape. Rusty stirred, his body stiff and sore, the gnawing hunger a constant companion. He lifted his head, his senses alert, scanning the surroundings for any signs of danger. The trap, a heavy weight on his leg, restricted his movements, making each step a painful ordeal. In the distance, he heard the faint rumble of a vehicle, a sound that once brought joy and anticipation, now filled him with trepidation. He retreated further into the shadows, his heart pounding with fear. The vehicle drew closer, its outline emerging from the morning mist. It was a battered pickup truck, its faded paint a testament to years of hard work. 2 figures emerged, their voices carried by the gentle breeze. "Over there by the bushes," a woman's voice said, laced with concern. "Poor thing, it looks like it's been there for days." Rusty watched them warily, his instincts screaming at him to flee. He had learned to distrust humans, their kindness a distant memory. But something in their voices, a gentle urgency, held him captive. The woman, her face etched with compassion, knelt down, her hand outstretched. "It's okay, sweetie," she whispered, her voice soothing. "We're here to help." Rusty flinched, his body trembling with fear. He couldn't understand their words, but their intentions were clear. They offered him food, a can of meat with a tantalizing aroma, but he couldn't bring himself to trust them. He had been betrayed before, and the pain of that betrayal was still raw. The man, a sturdy figure with kind eyes, spoke in a low, reassuring tone. "We won't hurt you," he said. "We just want to help you get out of that trap." Rusty remained hidden, his eyes darting between the 2 humans and the escape route. He was caught between his desperate need for help and his deep-rooted fear of humans. The woman, sensing his hesitation, placed the food a few feet away and retreated, giving him space. The sun climbed higher, the heat intensifying. Rusty's thirst grew unbearable, his stomach churning with hunger. He glanced at the food, the aroma making his mouth water. He took a tentative step forward, then another, his body trembling with apprehension. The woman, Sarah, watched Rusty's hesitant approach with bated breath. Her heart ached for the poor creature, its emaciated body and wary eyes a testament to its suffering. She exchanged a worried glance with her companion, Mike, a seasoned animal control officer known for his patience and gentle touch. "He's terrified," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Poor thing, he doesn't know we're here to help." Mike nodded, his gaze fixed on Rusty. We need to gain his trust, Sarah. It's going to take time and patience. Rusty inched closer to the food, his senses on high alert. He sniffed the air cautiously, his nostrils filled with the enticing smell of meat. Hunger gnawed at his belly, but fear held him back. He took a tentative bite, then another, devouring the food with ravenous hunger. Sarah and Mike remained still, their movements slow and deliberate, careful not to startle him. They spoke in soft, soothing tones, their words meant to calm and reassure. Rusty, his hunger somewhat satiated, looked up at them, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "That's it, boy," Mike said gently. "We're not going to hurt you." He reached into his bag and pulled out a pair of heavy-duty bolt cutters. Rusty tensed, his instincts screaming at him to flee. The sight of the metal tool triggered a wave of panic, a flashback to the agonizing moment when the trap had snapped shut on his leg. "Easy, boy," Mike said, his voice calm and reassuring. "This will just take a minute." He approached Rusty slowly, his movements deliberate and non-threatening. Sarah kept a safe distance, her presence a comforting reassurance. Rusty watched Mike's every move, his body trembling with fear. Mike knelt down beside Rusty, his hand outstretched. He spoke softly, his voice a gentle murmur, as he reached for the trap. Rusty flinched, but he didn't try to run. He seemed to sense that Mike was trying to help. With a swift, precise motion, Mike snapped the jaws of the trap open. Rusty yelped in pain, his leg throbbing. Mike gently examined the injured limb, his face etched with concern. The trap had cut deep into the flesh, the wound infected and festering. "We need to get him to the vet," he said to Sarah. "His leg is in bad shape." Sarah nodded, her eyes filled with compassion. "Let's get him out of here." Mike carefully lifted Rusty, his touch gentle and reassuring. Rusty whimpered, his body stiff with fear. He had never been held like this before, but there was something in Mike's strong arms that made him feel safe. As they carried him towards the truck, Rusty looked back at the place where he had spent the last 2 months, a place of pain and loneliness. He didn't know what the future held, but as he felt the warmth of human touch and heard the gentle murmur of their voices, a flicker of hope ignited in his heart. The ride to the veterinary clinic was a blur of sights and sounds for Rusty. He lay nestled in Sarah's lap, his head resting on her arm, his body trembling with a mixture of fear and exhaustion. The gentle rocking of the truck and the soothing murmur of Sarah's voice calmed him, and for the first time in months, he felt a sense of security. Mike focused on the road, glanced at Rusty in the rearview mirror. "He's a brave one," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "Most dogs in his condition would be snapping and biting." Sarah stroked Rusty's fur gently. "He's just scared and in pain," she replied. "He needs our help." At the clinic, Dr. Emily, a kind and experienced veterinarian, greeted them with a warm smile. She carefully examined Rusty's injured leg, her face etched with concern. "The trap has caused significant damage," she explained. "There's a deep infection, and we'll need to do surgery to clean the wound and repair the tendons." Sarah and Mike listened intently, their hearts heavy with worry. Dr. Emily reassured them that Rusty was a strong dog and had a good chance of recovery. They left him in her capable hands, promising to return the next day. The following morning, they rushed to the clinic, eager to see Rusty. Dr. Emily greeted them with a smile. "He's doing well," she said. "The surgery was successful, and he's resting comfortably." They were led to a small room where Rusty lay on a soft bed, his leg bandaged. He looked up at them with weary eyes, a faint wag of his tail signaling his recognition. Sarah knelt beside him, her hand gently stroking his fur. "You're a fighter, Rusty," she whispered. "You're going to be okay." Over the next few weeks, Sarah and Mike visited Rusty regularly, bringing him treats and toys. They spent hours talking to him, reading to him, and simply being present with him. Slowly but surely, Rusty began to heal, both physically and emotionally. He started to wag his tail more often, his eyes regaining their sparkle. He even allowed Sarah and Mike to touch him without flinching. One day, as Sarah sat beside Rusty, he rested his head on her lap, his eyes filled with trust and affection. In that moment, Sarah knew that Rusty had finally found his way home. As Rusty recovered from his surgery, the question of his future loomed large. Dr. Emily had made it clear that he couldn't return to the streets. He needed a safe and loving home where he could continue his healing, both physical and emotional. Sarah and Mike discussed the possibility of fostering him, but both had busy lives and weren't sure they could provide the constant care he needed. They decided to reach out to their network of animal lovers, hoping to find someone willing to open their hearts and home to Rusty. Word of Rusty's story spread quickly, and soon, a stream of visitors came to the clinic, eager to meet the brave dog who had captured their hearts. There were families with children, elderly couples seeking companionship, and young singles looking for a furry friend. But none seemed quite the right fit. One afternoon, a woman named Margaret arrived at the clinic. She was a retired teacher, living alone in a small cottage on the outskirts of town. She had a gentle demeanor and a kind face, and her eyes sparkled with warmth as she approached Rusty's kennel. Rusty, initially wary, was drawn to Margaret's calm energy. He wagged his tail tentatively as she knelt beside him, her voice soft and soothing. "Hello, Rusty," she said, her hand gently stroking his fur. "I've heard so much about you." Rusty leaned into her touch, his body relaxing. He sensed a kindred spirit in Margaret, someone who understood his pain and loneliness. Margaret spent the afternoon with Rusty, taking him for short walks in the clinic's garden and reading to him from her favorite book of poetry. By the end of the day, it was clear that a special bond had formed between them. Sarah and Mike watched with joy as Margaret and Rusty interacted. They knew they had found the perfect home for him. "He's found his angel," Sarah whispered, her eyes filled with tears. Mike nodded in agreement. "He deserves all the love in the world." The next day, Margaret returned to the clinic, ready to take Rusty home. He was hesitant at first, unsure of what was happening. But as he saw Margaret's smiling face and felt the warmth of her touch, he knew he was safe. He followed her willingly to her car, his tail wagging excitedly. As they drove away from the clinic, Rusty looked back one last time, a sense of gratitude and hope filling his heart. He was leaving behind a life of pain and loneliness, embarking on a new journey filled with love and companionship. Margaret's cottage was a haven of peace and tranquility. Nestled amidst a lush garden, it exuded an aura of warmth and comfort. Rusty, still tentative and unsure, explored his new surroundings with cautious curiosity. The scent of lavender and freshly baked bread filled the air, a stark contrast to the harsh smells of the streets he had known. Margaret, with infinite patience, guided him through the house, her gentle voice a constant reassurance. She showed him his new bed, a soft, cozy nest in a quiet corner of the living room. She introduced him to her other companions, two elderly cats, Whiskers and Mittens, who eyed him with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. The first few days were a period of adjustment for both Rusty and Margaret. He was still skittish, flinching at sudden movements and loud noises. Nightmares plagued his sleep, filled with the terror of the trap and the loneliness of abandonment. Margaret, with her innate understanding of animals, provided him with the space he needed while offering constant reassurance and love. She took him for short walks in the nearby woods, letting him explore the wonders of nature at his own pace. She read to him by the fireplace, her voice a soothing balm to his troubled soul. She cooked him delicious meals, nourishing his body and soul. Gradually, Rusty began to relax. He started to wag his tail more often, his eyes regaining their sparkle. He played with Whiskers and Mittens, their initial animosity replaced by a grudging acceptance. He followed Margaret around the house, his presence a constant source of comfort and joy. One evening, as Margaret sat by the fireplace, Rusty curled up at her feet, his head resting on her lap. He looked up at her with eyes filled with love and gratitude. In that moment, Margaret knew that Rusty had truly found his home. The weeks turned into months, and Rusty blossomed under Margaret's care. His fur regained its golden sheen, his body filled out, and his spirit soared. He was no longer the scared, wounded dog who had arrived at her doorstep. He was a happy, confident companion, his heart overflowing with love for his new family. Life with Margaret was a balm to Rusty's wounded soul. Days were filled with simple pleasures, leisurely walks in the woods, naps in sun-drenched patches of the garden, and evenings spent by the fireplace, listening to Margaret read aloud. He had grown to love the comforting routine, the predictable rhythm of their days, a stark contrast to the uncertainty and fear that had marked his life on the streets. Yet, despite the peace he had found, the shadows of the past lingered. Certain sounds, the distant rumble of a truck, the sharp clang of metal, would send shivers down his spine, triggering flashbacks of the trap, the pain, the abandonment. He would cower, his body trembling, his eyes filled with terror, until Margaret's soothing voice and gentle touch brought him back to the safety of the present. One day, while walking in the woods, Rusty caught a scent that sent a jolt of fear through him. It was a familiar smell, one he associated with his former human, the one who had left him chained to a post, his heart filled with promises that were never kept. He froze, his body rigid, his senses on high alert. Margaret, sensing his distress, knelt beside him, her hand gently stroking his fur. "What is it, Rusty?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. Rusty whimpered, his eyes darting around, searching for the source of the scent. He couldn't see anyone, but the smell was unmistakable. It was him, his former human. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over Rusty: fear, anger, confusion, and a lingering trace of the love he had once felt. He wanted to run, to hide, to escape the pain of that memory. But a part of him, a deep-seated loyalty that refused to die, urged him to confront his past. He pulled on his leash, straining towards the direction of the scent. Margaret, sensing his determination, followed him, her heart heavy with apprehension. They walked deeper into the woods, the scent growing stronger with each step. Finally, they came to a clearing, and there he was, his former human, standing by a campfire, his back turned towards them. Rusty let out a low growl, a mixture of fear and anger rumbling in his chest. Margaret tightened her grip on the leash, her eyes fixed on the man. She didn't know what to expect, but she was ready to protect Rusty, no matter the cost. The man, oblivious to their presence, stirred the embers of the campfire, his face etched with a weariness that Rusty had never seen before. He looked older, his shoulders slumped, his hair streaked with gray. A wave of sadness washed over Rusty, a realization that his former human was not the same man who had abandoned him. He pulled on the leash, eager to confront him, to demand an explanation for the pain he had endured. But Margaret held him back, her voice calm and reassuring. "Wait, Rusty," she whispered. "Let's see what he's doing." They watched as the man pulled out a worn photograph from his pocket, his fingers tracing the image with a tenderness that spoke volumes. Rusty recognized the picture instantly. It was a photo of him, taken when he was a puppy, his golden fur gleaming in the sunlight, his eyes filled with joy and innocence. The man held the photo close to his heart, his lips moving in a silent conversation. Tears streamed down his face, his body racked with sobs. Rusty, his anger melting away, felt a pang of empathy for the man who had once been his world. He whined softly, a sound that caught the man's attention. He turned, his eyes widening in disbelief as he saw Rusty standing there, his tail wagging tentatively. A look of shock, then recognition, then overwhelming joy spread across his face. "Rusty?" he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "Is it really you?" He dropped to his knees, his arms outstretched. Rusty hesitated for a moment, the memory of his abandonment still fresh in his mind. But the love he had once felt for this man, a love that had never truly died, overcame his fear. He rushed into the man's embrace, his tail wagging furiously, his body trembling with joy. The man hugged him tightly, burying his face in his fur, his tears soaking Rusty's coat. "I'm so sorry, Rusty," he sobbed. "I never meant to leave you. I had to move, I lost my job. I had nowhere to go. I thought I was doing the right thing, leaving you with my brother, but he didn't take care of you." Rusty listened, his heart filled with a mixture of sadness and understanding. He had learned that humans, like dogs, were capable of making mistakes, of being hurt and lost. But he also knew that forgiveness and love had the power to heal even the deepest wounds. He licked the man's face, his warm tongue offering comfort and reassurance. The man looked up, his eyes filled with gratitude and love. "Thank you, Rusty," he whispered. "Thank you for forgiving me." The encounter in the woods marked a turning point for both Rusty and his former human, John. The years of guilt and regret that had weighed heavily on John's heart began to lift, replaced by a renewed sense of hope and purpose. He visited Rusty and Margaret regularly, bringing gifts and spending hours playing with Rusty, reliving the joy of their shared past. Margaret watched their interactions with a mixture of joy and concern. She saw the deep bond between them, the undeniable love that had endured despite the years of separation and pain. But she also worried about Rusty, about the possibility of him being hurt again. One day, John confessed to Margaret his desire to take Rusty back. He had found a stable job and a small apartment, and he was confident he could provide a loving home for Rusty. Margaret listened patiently, her heart torn between her love for Rusty and her understanding of John's yearning. She knew that Rusty deserved a chance at a complete reunion with the human he had never stopped loving. But she also knew that she would miss him terribly, that her life would be emptier without his presence. After much deliberation, Margaret agreed to let Rusty go. It was a difficult decision, but she knew it was the right one. She had given Rusty a safe haven, a place to heal and rediscover his trust in humans. Now, it was time for him to return to the man who had always held a special place in his heart. The farewell was bittersweet. Tears were shed, promises were made, and hugs were exchanged. Rusty, sensing the gravity of the moment, licked Margaret's face, his eyes filled with gratitude and love. He would never forget her kindness, the sanctuary she had provided, the love she had showered upon him. He followed John to his car, his tail wagging with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. As they drove away from Margaret's cottage, Rusty looked back one last time, a silent promise to carry her love with him always. Life with John was different from the peaceful routine he had shared with Margaret. The city was a whirlwind of sights and sounds, a constant source of stimulation. But John was attentive and loving, making sure Rusty felt safe and secure in his new environment. They went for walks in the park, played fetch in the backyard, and cuddled on the couch in the evenings. John showered Rusty with affection, making up for the years of lost time. Rusty, in return, gave John unconditional love and companionship, filling his life with joy and purpose. Years passed, and Rusty, now a senior dog with a touch of gray around his muzzle, basked in the warmth of John's love. The scars of his past had faded, replaced by a sense of contentment and peace. He had found his way back to the human who had always held a special place in his heart, and together, they had created a life filled with love, companionship, and shared adventures. One crisp autumn day, John and Rusty returned to Margaret's cottage. It had been a while since their last visit, and Rusty's heart thumped with anticipation as they approached the familiar gate. He remembered the scent of lavender, the warmth of the fireplace, the gentle touch of Margaret's hand. Margaret, now frail but still radiating warmth and kindness, welcomed them with open arms. Rusty rushed towards her, his tail wagging furiously, his body trembling with joy. He licked her face, his warm tongue conveying the depth of his affection. Margaret knelt down, her wrinkled hands gently stroking his fur. "Oh, Rusty," she whispered, her voice filled with love. "It's so good to see you." They spent the afternoon reminiscing, sharing stories and laughter. Rusty, nestled between John and Margaret, felt a sense of completeness, a sense of belonging. He had come full circle, his journey of pain and redemption culminating in this moment of shared love and gratitude. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the garden, John and Rusty bid farewell to Margaret. Rusty, his heart filled with a bittersweet mixture of joy and sadness, looked back at the cottage, a silent promise to return, to keep the flame of their connection alive. On the drive back, John, his eyes glistening with unshed tears, spoke softly to Rusty. "You know, Rusty," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you taught me the true meaning of love and forgiveness. You showed me that even in the darkest of times, hope and healing are possible." Rusty, his head resting on John's lap, looked up at him with eyes filled with understanding and love. He had found his purpose, his reason for being. He had brought two lonely souls together, healing their wounds and filling their lives with unconditional love. As the city lights twinkled in the distance, Rusty closed his eyes, his heart overflowing with gratitude. He had traveled a long and arduous path, but he had finally found his way home, to a place where love, loyalty, and forgiveness reigned supreme.